No warning, no trailer clues, no quiet build-up. Just one announcement that instantly sent shockwaves through the Heartland fandom. After years of absence, unanswered questions, and emotional closure that never truly felt complete, Wardle has spoken, and what he revealed changes everything we thought we knew about Heartland's future. For a long time, Heartland fans learned to live with silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy silence that follows a goodbye that never feels fully finished. Ty Borden's story ended, yet his presence never truly left. His name lived in memories, in quiet moments, in the way characters spoke about love and loss without saying his name out loud. Season after season, viewers were told to move on, and slowly, painfully, many did. Then came the announcement, not wrapped in drama, not dressed in hype, just a simple, honest confirmation from Wardle himself. He is returning to Heartland. The impact of those words cannot be overstated. This wasn't just news, it was an emotional rupture. Fans who had accepted closure suddenly questioned it. Storylines that felt resolved now felt unfinished. And the idea of Heartland Season 20 instantly transformed from another chapter into something far more dangerous and exciting. A reckoning. What makes this return so powerful is not just who is coming back, but when. Heartland Season 20 arrives at a moment when the characters, especially Amy, have rebuilt their lives on carefully balanced foundations. Stability exists, but it is fragile. Growth has happened, but it came at a cost. Ty's return doesn't arrive to heal wounds. It arrives to reopen them. Wardle's announcement wasn't loud, but it was intentional. He didn't frame it as a comeback or a victory lap. Instead, he spoke with reflection, calm, and emotional awareness. That tone alone suggests this return is not about shock value, it's about meaning, about unfinished emotional business that Heartland never truly escaped. For years, the show taught its audience how to grieve. Season 20 now dares to ask a far more unsettling question. What happens when the person you learn to live without suddenly steps back into your world? This is not a reset. This is not a fantasy. This is a collision between the past and the present. And no one walks away unchanged. Amy Fleming has grown into a version of herself shaped by loss, responsibility, and quiet resilience. She is no longer surviving. She is functioning, leading, and protecting her world. Ty's return does not erase that growth, but it threatens to expose the emotional cost of it. Everything Amy buried to keep moving forward now has a face, a voice, a history that refuses to stay silent. And Ty does not return as the man he once was. Time changes people. Absence reshapes identity. Wardle's return signals that Ty Borden is stepping back into Heartland not as a solution, but as a complication. A presence filled with restraint, awareness, and emotional weight. He understands what his return means, not just to Amy, but to everyone who learned to survive his absence. Heartland Season 20 is not preparing viewers for reunion. It is preparing them for tension, for unresolved emotions that don't fit neatly into happy endings or tragic conclusions. This is a season built on discomfort, honesty, and emotional risk. And the most unsettling truth? No one inside Heartland is ready for what this return will demand. The real tension does not begin with the announcement itself. It begins after the excitement fades and reality settles in. Because a return like this does not exist in isolation, it forces every character to reassess the version of themselves they worked so hard to become. Heartland has always been about endurance, but Season 20 quietly shifts that focus toward confrontation. Not loud confrontations, but internal ones that cannot be escaped. The ranch, once a symbol of routine and grounding, becomes a place filled with emotional echoes. Conversations feel heavier. Silences stretch longer than usual. Even familiar spaces feel altered, as if the land itself remembers what the people are trying not to say. This season does not rush toward answers. It lingers in uncertainty, allowing discomfort to breathe. That choice alone signals that the story is entering deeper emotional territory. Amy's strength, which once felt unbreakable, is now tested in a new way. Not through tragedy, but through presence. She has spent years defining herself through resilience, responsibility, and forward motion. Now she must face a truth she avoided for survival. Moving on is not the same as healing. the return forces her to slow down emotionally, something she has not allowed herself to do in a long time. What makes this struggle powerful is its subtlety. Amy does not fall apart. She does not lose control. Instead, she becomes quieter, more guarded. Her thoughts turn inward. The audience sees a woman balancing two truths at once: gratitude for the life she built and grief for the life that was interrupted. Season 20 allows both to exist without judgment, making her journey feel honest rather than dramatic. The family dynamic also shifts in ways that are easy to miss but impossible to ignore. Trust, which once felt stable, becomes fragile, not because of betrayal, but because of uncertainty. People begin to question what permanence really means. If something believed to be final can change, then what else might be temporary? This question quietly affects every relationship on the ranch. There is also a noticeable change in how the past is discussed. It is no longer treated as something finished or safely stored away. It becomes active again, influencing decisions and reactions. Memories once shared freely now feel sensitive. Words are chosen carefully. Some topics are avoided entirely. This emotional caution adds a layer of tension that sits beneath every interaction. Season 20 also explores the cost of emotional independence. Characters who learn to rely only on themselves now face the challenge of vulnerability. Strength, once defined by endurance, is redefined as honesty. And honesty, in this season, is not comforting. It is risky. It exposes unresolved feelings that do not fit into simple narratives of closure or acceptance. What makes this chapter of Heartland especially compelling is its refusal to provide immediate comfort. The story does not reassure the audience that everything will be okay. Instead, it asks viewers to sit with uncertainty, to understand that growth does not erase pain. It often reveals it more clearly. This emotional maturity is what separates Season 20 from previous arcs. The return is not treated as a miracle or a reward. It is treated as a responsibility, one that requires emotional accountability from everyone involved. Each character must decide what they are willing to confront and what they are still hiding from themselves. That internal conflict becomes the true driving force of the season. As the episodes unfold, it becomes clear that this story is not about reclaiming what was lost. It is about understanding what was changed forever. Heartland Season 20 does not promise resolution. It promises truth. And sometimes, truth is the most unsettling outcome of all. As the season moves forward, the emotional pressure does not explode. It tightens. What was once distant becomes unavoidable. People who believed they had made peace with the past begin to realize that peace was built on distance, not understanding. And distance no longer exists. The presence changes how time is felt. Days move slower. Decisions feel heavier. Nothing feels neutral anymore. One of the most striking shifts in this part of the story is how certainty disappears. Characters who once spoke with confidence now hesitate. Words that used to come easily feel dangerous. This hesitation is not weakness, it is awareness. The return has forced everyone to recognize how much of their stability depended on things staying exactly the same. Amy, in particular, begins to experience a quiet, emotional exhaustion, not from chaos, but from control. She has spent years managing her feelings carefully, keeping them organized and contained so life could continue. Now those feelings resist control. They surface unexpectedly, not as tears or anger, but as pauses, missed words, and moments of distraction. This internal struggle becomes more visible than any external conflict. What makes this stage of her journey compelling is that there is no clear right choice. Every emotional path carries loss. To protect her present, she risks denying her truth. To acknowledge her truth, she risks destabilizing everything she has worked to preserve. Season 20's thus allows this dilemma to exist without pushing it toward resolution, trusting the audience to sit with the discomfort. Other relationships on the ranch begin to reflect similar tension. People start recognizing how much they avoided difficult conversations in the name of peace. The return exposes that avoidance. Long-standing dynamics feel slightly off, as if everyone is recalibrating where they stand. This emotional recalibration adds a quiet suspense to even the most ordinary interactions. There is also a growing awareness that healing is not a straight line. Characters who believed they had already done the work now understand that healing can be revisited, questioned, and even undone. This realization is unsettling because it challenges the idea that pain has an expiration date. Season 20 leans into this truth without offering reassurance. The story also deepens its exploration of identity. Who are you when the version of yourself shaped by loss is no longer the only version that exists? The return forces characters to confront identities they thought were permanent. Roles shift. Emotional boundaries blur. The stability they relied on now feels conditional. What stands out most in this section is the absence of clear villains or heroes. No one is wrong, no one is completely right. Everyone is responding the best way they know how to a situation they never prepared for. This moral complexity gives the season its emotional weight. It feels real because it refuses simplicity. Silence becomes one of the most powerful elements of the story. Not empty silence, but loaded silence. The kind that carries unspoken thoughts and unresolved feelings. These quiet moments speak louder than confrontation ever could. They remind the audience that some emotions are too complicated for words. As this part of the season unfolds, it becomes increasingly clear that the return is not the climax. It is the catalyst. The real story is what follows. The emotional aftershocks. The slow realization that life cannot simply return to how it was before the announcement. Something fundamental has shifted, and it cannot be undone. Season 20 uses this shift to challenge the idea of closure itself. It asks whether closure is something we achieve, or something we tell ourselves so we can keep going. And what happens when that story no longer holds? By the end of this section, the audience understands one thing with certainty. This season is not building toward a dramatic payoff. It is building toward emotional truth. And that truth, once fully faced, will demand choices no one is ready to make yet. As the season reaches its final stretch, the emotional weight no longer feels distant or theoretical. It becomes personal, unavoidable, and deeply internal. What once felt like a slow, emotional disturbance now settles into something heavier. A quiet understanding that nothing can return to its previous state. The presence that changed everything has now reshaped how each character sees their own future. This final phase is not driven by dramatic events, but by realization. Characters begin to understand that avoiding emotional truth is no longer an option. The comfort of uncertainty fades, replaced by the pressure of choice. Not choices that come with clear rewards, but choices that demand emotional honesty, even when the outcome is unclear. Amy reaches a point where strength alone is no longer enough. For years, strength meant endurance. It meant carrying responsibility without complaint and protecting others from emotional fallout. Now, strength begins to mean something far more difficult, allowing herself to acknowledge what still hurts. She is not pulled backward into the past, but she is no longer running from it either. This balance is fragile, and the season treats it with care. What makes this moment powerful is its restraint. There is no sudden clarity, no perfect emotional resolution. Instead, there is acceptance of complexity. Amy understands that loving deeply leaves lasting marks, and that growth does not erase those marks. It teaches you how to live with them. This realization changes how she views herself, not as someone defined by loss, but as someone shaped by love that mattered. The emotional impact extends beyond her alone. The family dynamic subtly shifts again, not through conflict, but through awareness. People begin to speak with more honesty, even when it feels uncomfortable. There is a quiet acknowledgement that pretending everything is fine does more harm than good. This openness does not fix everything, but it creates space for truth to exist. One of the most important themes in this section is emotional responsibility. The return has reminded everyone that actions, even well-intended ones, carry weight. Avoidance, silence, and emotional distance are no longer seen as neutral choices. They are recognized for what they are, coping mechanisms that once helped but now limit growth. There is also a growing sense that the future cannot be built on fear of disruption. Stability, the season suggests, does not come from controlling outcomes, but from trusting emotional resilience. This idea quietly reframes everything Heartland has stood for. Healing is no longer about restoring balance. It is about accepting change. By this point, the audience understands that this season was never about shock or nostalgia. It was about emotional reckoning, about facing the truth that some connections leave an imprint that time cannot erase, and that those imprints do not weaken us, they deepen us. As the season closes, there is no promise that everything will be easy going forward. What exists instead is something more honest, clarity without certainty. The characters move forward not because all questions are answered, but because they finally stopped avoiding them. Heartland, Season 20 ends on a quiet but powerful note. Not with finality, but with understanding. The kind that only comes after facing what you once believed you had already survived. And in that understanding lies the true legacy of this season. Not a return, not a surprise, but the courage to live truthfully after everything has changed. The final stretch of Heartland Season 20 is not defined by revelations shouted across fields or confrontations in barns. Instead, it is defined by presence. Quiet, deliberate, unavoidable presence. The people who have lived through absence and loss now realize that the return they never expected is more than an event. It is a test of emotional endurance. Not endurance in the physical sense, but endurance of the heart, of memory, and of truth that refuses to settle into neat compartments. For Amy, the pressure is no longer external. It is internal. A constant weighing of past, present, and what she dares hope for in the future. Every glance, every word, every pause carries more meaning than it ever did before. She is acutely aware that life has moved forward in her absence, yet the return forces her to question how much forward motion can exist alongside unresolved emotions. Her challenge is not to choose between past and present, but to live in a space where both coexist, complicated and unavoidable. This section examines the subtle ways in which relationships transform under weighty circumstances. Bonds that seem secure now carry tension, not because of betrayal, but because familiarity has been disrupted. Conversations become exercises in careful navigation, where honesty can be both liberation and danger. Each character is forced to measure not just their words, but the emotional energy that their presence or silence carries. Season 20 positions emotional intelligence as both shield and weapon. How one responds can heal, or it can reopen wounds no one wants to confront. Ties return, and Graham Wardle's embodiment of that presence serves as the axis around which these dynamics pivot. He does not dominate the space or attempt to correct past mistakes with grand gestures. His power lies in restraint, in showing the audience and the characters that returning does not erase consequence. It amplifies it. Every interaction becomes a study in tension, the weight of memory, the pull of lost opportunities, and the subtle reckoning with choices made in absence. The story demonstrates that reconciliation is never automatic. It is carefully earned through acknowledgement and patience. Season 20 also explores the idea of legacy in an understated yet profound way. The ranch, the animals, and the routines that have long provided comfort are not simply backdrops, they are mirrors reflecting the characters' internal struggles. Horses, in particular, remain silent teachers. Their reactions, unpredictable and sensitive, echo the emotional rhythms of the people who care for them. They respond to hesitation, anxiety, and unspoken grief in ways that force the characters to confront what they cannot yet articulate. It is in these moments, between human and animal, that the most authentic revelations emerge. As the season moves toward closure, Amy and those closest to her begin to recognize that healing is not a linear process. It does not follow neatly plotted arcs or satisfy the desire for immediate resolution. Instead, it is iterative, a series of small recognitions, honest conversations, and moments of quiet understanding that accumulate over time. Season 20 allows viewers to see that emotional depth is more important than dramatic spectacle, that subtlety carries more weight than overt resolution. This is what distinguishes the final arc of this season from prior Heartland storytelling. The narrative also stresses the necessity of facing fear without expectation of reward. Characters who had once avoided emotional exposure now confront it head-on, not because it promises happiness, but because it is unavoidable. Silence is no longer an option. Avoidance is no longer effective. Every choice has meaning, and every action has emotional consequence. Season 20 emphasizes the responsibility that comes with living fully in the aftermath of profound change. In these concluding episodes, the tension is not in the plot itself, but in the lingering question: what will it take for the characters to live honestly in a world that has shifted beneath them? It is not an easy question, nor is it resolved with finality. The audience is left to observe, to reflect, and to feel alongside the characters. The season resists tidy endings, insisting instead that life, loss, and love are inherently complicated. Ultimately, Heartland Season 20 concludes not with closure, but with presence. The return that seemed impossible has reshaped every character's understanding of themselves and each other. Ty's reappearance does not erase the past, but it reframes it, offering clarity without certainty. The emotional
Landscape is richer, more nuanced, and undeniably alive. Viewers are invited to sit with that richness, to understand that growth and love are never neat, and that sometimes the greatest courage is simply living truthfully after everything has changed. By the end, the ranch is no longer just a home, it is a witness. The people who inhabit it carry the marks of absence and return, of endurance and acknowledgement. Season 20 leaves viewers with the lingering truth that life does not always provide answers, but it rewards those willing to face the complexity of their own hearts. And in that quiet courage, Heartland finds its deepest resonance, offering a finale that is emotionally complete, even if it remains beautifully unresolved.